part of the discussion obviously is going to be about what the government can do with some of the longer term issues, but also talking about some of the concerns that people still have, because no agreement is perfect. I can speak to that firsthand. And there's always an opportunity for improvement. But, you know, we talked yesterday a little bit about the broader discussion on trade, and that how trade has sort of become the issue that everyone blames for all of the world's problems. So when you look at when you talk about the digital economy and its importance, we find that something like 75% of the benefits of the internet accrue to manufacturing and other sectors outside the internet. And yet I don't think that's really well understood, or the fact that we really are at a transformational moment with the use of the cloud and creating efficiencies and what data can do to really help solve some of the world's biggest problems. So, you know, you spent a lot of time talking about cloud, and I know everybody always looks at the ceiling when you talk about cloud, not you, but everybody. So how do you explain cloud in a very simple sort of way, and the benefits of cloud, and you know how technology can be trusted and embraced? And you probably are doing quite a lot of that with some of the non-TPP members to talk about the benefits. I don't know if you have a favorite anecdote or story from your discussions.
Yeah, Dorothy, good question. I think I remember having a discussion with a small country who is part of TPP that at an early stage in the process, and indeed before I went into USTR, when I was talking about cloud issues, said, well, you know, you don't understand, we don't really have an interest in our country around those things. We get why this matters to the US, but we don't even have that many computers in our country, and so this is really not something that's critical to us. You know, my response at the time, which I now get to talk about officially, is to say, no, actually, nothing could be farther from the truth. Actually, things like the cloud architecture is the single biggest equalizer of opportunity that has happened for an emerging market. You know, it really takes this power of massive computing, dramatically cuts the cost, and that's what's enabling the entrepreneurs in any country to have access to the same kind of computing power they would have if they were in a large corporation in the US or anywhere. So it's really the great equalizer. And then we talk about, you know, why those cost efficiencies are lost if cloud providers are required to have servers in every country that they serve, or why, if data can't transfer, why that cuts into it. So I really try to bring this back to the fact that, you know, this is what matters for people who are starting businesses, who have the same hopes and aspirations of anyone who starts a digital business here, and how through this shift they now have that same access. And so I think ultimately there's been an increased understanding around that. I think the TPP helps us as we now take this into other fora like TISA and TTIP. But I also agree that there is not yet a full understanding of what this means. And I think we have collectively a challenge before us, which is how do we explain it in accessible ways and get beyond things that are the buzzwords and really talk about, practically speaking, what does that mean for individual citizens in the country who will have access through things that are provided, enabled by the Digital 2 but who may be denied that same ability to access the large capacity of the cloud if barriers continue to be erected.
Thanks. So you talked about sort of the big three issues in the Digital 2. I think for companies, we've a lot of us have talked about not just the importance of the rules of the road and the predictability and certainty, but also on the importance of infrastructure and the need to connect. And I know state is working hard on its Global Connect project, and a number of us have our own sort of last mile sorts of projects. And then the technology industry is pretty strong on skills training and trying to make sure that those gaps are filled. But that doesn't seem to resonate very well. It seems like the story is all about sort of the trade rules and nothing about sort of the complementary policies that governments put in place. When you talk to other governments about the importance of the digital agenda, do you talk about sort of creating the right kind of broader regulatory framework?
Sure. I mean, we do in the context of talking about how barriers that are, one, barriers, but two, rules that are inconsistent or lack some level of conformity between countries are particularly hard for digitally intensive industries who are looking beyond their own borders to access their markets. You know, secondly, through this whole of government initiative of trying to build more principles around broader internet access, the type of things that we're doing in places like the G7, the G20, where we're sort of looking at how do we take every fora and talk about not only the kind of trade rules, but talk about the opportunities it presented. We're really, using that as a need. And then finally, I think, as we've also now moved into what I think is one of the best opportunities, which is to move to supplement the work that we've done around consumer-facing technology, which increasingly people understand, to the type of large industrial applications and the kind of intelligence that's going to come from that. I think we're also showing, as in places like manufacturing and others, how there are these efficiencies that can be brought to bear. I think as you see more large companies and others get into this business, certainly GE with their Predicts business and others are really taking advantage of this capacity. And I think there's another wave of learning. So I think if you take what governments use as customers of technology, how we can promote better access for our citizens, and then finally take these sorts of industrial applications that will make us more efficient, help us conserve resources. I think there's a great story to be told, but I don't believe the story is yet being told as fully and as comprehensively as it can be.